Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our legal system, our criminal justice system, and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today I'd like to spend some time speaking about the general area of elder law. So many of us have had issues involving possibly parents, neighbors, relatives, concerning issues about their own situation and what decisions to make. And certainly, legal advice is very important when considering a variety of lifetime issues. Also, we'll find in many times that our baby boomers are also asking similar questions about what decisions to make, when they should make them, and what kind of action should they take now in their middle life to provide for their senior years. Today, we're very fortunate to have Colonie Town resident Lou Pierro with us today, and welcome, Lou.
Thank you, Peter.
And thanks for joining me today to talk about this very important subject for all of our citizens.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you know, Lou, you've spent a long time in your practice of law dealing with these very same issues that I've opened with today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the nature of your law practice?
My practice has been in the Albany area since 1984. So we've been here about 23 years. And it specializes in estate planning and elder law. And of course, 23 years ago, there was no elder law. There was no such thing. And that shows how our society has changed and how the needs of our clients have changed as people live longer, as people have different health care needs, as the cost of health care has just blown through the roof and has become the #1 issue for many people as they age. How do you pay for health care and how do you pay for long-term care is something that everyone really needs to think about and focus on as we go through our aging process, as you said, people currently over 65 and people who hope to be over 65.
Counselor, you know, I see that oftentimes, too, and you've mentioned that health care is one of the most significant issues today in our society in general, and certainly a key issue for our seniors, and also, too, the disposition of their property and how they can maintain a quality of life at the same time that some may no longer be working as well. Let's take a minute to focus on our seniors right now. What actions can seniors take to continue to provide for health care, and also how to maintain a quality of life with the property that they have earned over the years, and how they can best distribute it to others if they choose to do so?
When you talk about senior health care, there's one program that comes to mind and that you must focus on, and that's the Medicare program. And Medicare is the safety net for seniors, and it provides care for physicians, it provides hospital care, and it has been a phenomenally successful program since it was enacted in 1965. The problem has been cost of health care, aging population, the number of seniors relying on Medicare have put a tremendous strain on the federal budget. And there is something out there they call the Medicare Trust Fund. And unfortunately, the projections right now from Washington are that the Medicare Trust Fund will be bankrupt in about 10 years, somewhere around 2016-17. What happens when that trust fund goes into the red? That's a question that we're all asking and that the presidential candidates will be debating over the next several months. But for seniors, there is a whole range of service that they may need. And for boomers, it's probably going to be worse because the federal coffers will be drier when the boomers come to that point in their lives. And you need to look at personal responsibility for health care and long-term care costs. And we have prescription drugs now covered under Medicare Part D. So the first thing that seniors need to make sure is that they have the right drug plan. Is their Medicare Part D plan correct? And it's phenomenally confusing. We've gotten through a lot of the smoke and are really now at a point where the plans are clear, they're offered, you get some consultation on that through Medicare. But making sure your prescription drugs are covered and that's not going to break the bank because they are expensive is number one. Your Medicare plan is number two, and then you can buy a supplemental policy that will pay the things that Medicare doesn't pay in the range of doctors and hospitals. Where people fall short and where the healthcare system does not guide people is into the services that are not covered by Medicare and private health insurance. For example, long-term care, home health care, personal care aides, assisted living, nursing home care. People must be aware that there is no system of payment in place through the Medicare program for all of those types of expenses. And that's where the assets of our individuals, our seniors, fall prey to the cost of that catastrophic care.
You know, I was just talking to someone the other day, and I was telling them about my parents who have long ago purchased long-term health care insurance. And the suggestion was by that person that that's not for everybody. In fact, there are people counseling some seniors not to do that at all because you're taking current dollars and putting them into a premium, which A, you may never use, and two, your expenses may be able to be charged off in some other way, and maybe it's not a great investment. What do you say to that?
Well, it's not an investment at all. If you look at your homeowner's insurance, how many homes burned to the ground? 1 in 1,200, I think, is the statistic. But would you go without homeowner's insurance if that became you? In long-term care, once you reach age 65, 2 in 5 people will need long-term care. This is an insurance product. It's not an investment. It protects investments. It keeps you from having to use your own assets and resources to pay for care when the time comes. What we counsel our clients is if you can afford the insurance, and if you are insurable, because this is not for everyone, you have to meet underwriting criteria, then insurance is the way to go. Because for those people young enough and healthy enough to buy long-term care insurance, they're not going to need long-term care for many years, hopefully. But when they do, will Medicare and Medicaid, which is the other government program, be able to pay for the types of care that they're going to want to receive? What this really comes down to is choice and access. You want to have the choice of being taken care of in your own home or going to a nice adult community. Medicaid doesn't pay for those types of services. If you don't plan for that and your own resources can't provide for that, then insurance is the way that you put in place a plan now to pay for those expenses. For those people who cannot get insurance, whether it's they have a pre-existing condition, you've already been diagnosed with a condition, or the premiums are just unaffordable, then you have to look at ulterior planning opportunities. And that usually falls into the Medicaid category, which is that other program in Washington that pays for care, but only if you are indigent. And that's really the key. The Medicaid program does pay for nursing homes, assisted living, home health care, but you must be indigent in order to use that program.
Well, we all see so many different, oftentimes advertisements by attorneys and others in the community and throughout, I imagine, the United States of America, suggesting that there are actions people can take to actually possibly either appear indigent so that Medicaid will kick in for them, or some other action that they could take so that that federal government will actually pick up some or all of their health care expenses at a certain time because they've distributed everything they've owned. And obviously that's a very deep issue which would take so much time to discuss. But nonetheless, could you speak to that for a minute about
Sure.
Those people ask those questions all the time, and whether it's fair, and what do you do, and how do you do it?
Whether it's fair is a question that we are posed as elder law attorneys by mainly the insurance industry, who is trying to sell long-term care insurance, but also by government officials and various people who look at this and say, well, why should the government subsidize care when you have resources? My answer is, why should the government pay for certain types of care and leave others out to sea and leave them abandoned? If we call it the disease lottery. If you have cancer or heart disease, you get full coverage. But if you have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or one of the other diseases, you get no coverage. What's fair about that? And the system isn't one that we created. It's not one we designed, but it's one we have to navigate through and provide our clients with the best advice that we can provide them. And in our continuum of advice, if people can afford to self-insure, what does it take to use your own income and your own assets to pay for your own care? Well, nursing home costs in Albany County right now are about $9,000 a month. So you're looking at $110,000, $115,000 a year. If you can afford that, then you don't need to do anything more than you're self-insured. You'll never deplete your assets. Your income can keep pace with your expenses. If you fall short of being able to pay $110,000 a year, then you would buy insurance to cover the gap between what you can afford to pay and what the insurance product can then supplement your income with, so that you don't have to deplete your assets, sell your home, cash your stocks, all the things that people don't want to do because you've worked a lifetime to protect those assets. We work through that progression, and the last piece is, if you cannot self-insure and you cannot buy insurance, what are you left with? And the only program that the government gives us is Medicaid. It's the only game in town to pay for these types of expenses. In order to get there, how do you shelter assets? The primary vehicle is to create a trust. And a trust is a legal arrangement that has a trustee, someone who you entrust your assets to, that manages the assets on your behalf. You collect the income from the trust, but you give up the right to the principal, the actual assets themselves. Other than the fact you can live in your home, you can use the real estate, and you collect the income, dividend, and interest income off of the other types of assets in there, but the principal is locked away. That type of trust is protective for Medicaid purposes. The key to that type of trust, under new laws which were just enacted in New York last year and across the country, is that the transfers have to be made 5 years in advance. So they keep setting the bar higher and higher, making it more and more difficult to qualify for Medicaid. So people need to think about this and contemplate this in advance. You cannot wait until the house is on fire and then go try to buy your homeowner's insurance or try to save the house. You've got to put these steps in place long before the event occurs.
Citizens often ask, my husband and I have owned this house for 40 years, and now my husband needs to go in for nursing care. I cannot, he can't enjoy a quality of life here at home anymore, and we need to extend him to a nursing care facility, and I don't have any money. Will the county take my house? How does that work?
The answer is not until you are deceased.
Okay.
If a spouse, a husband or wife, lives at home and their other spouse needs to go to a nursing home, then the government actually is fairly generous under that circumstance. You get to keep the home plus about $100,000, depending upon how much you start with. The minimum is $75,000, but it could go up to $100,000 depending upon your total assets when you start. So if you're living at home and you're a spouse living at home, you get to keep $75,000, plus you get to keep income of about $2,500 per month. That's what the government allows to get your spouse qualified for Medicaid in the nursing home.
All right.
So the house is protected. But when that spouse passes, you have to look at estate planning, and are those assets then going to be collected? Are there collection actions that the county could bring against the estate to recoup monies paid for the Medicaid that is being provided to the spouse in the nursing home?
Do they put a lien on your property during the time the county's providing Medicaid for a spouse in a nursing facility?
Not if there's a spouse or other qualified individual living at home. If you have a disabled child, they get the same types of exemptions that a spouse gets. So a disabled child living at home would also qualify the house as exempt. Only if the house is either abandoned or if there is no qualified individual, spouse, or disabled child living there, then could a lien be placed against the home.
Now, I spent 8 years as a county legislator here in Albany County and learned certainly a significant amount about a variety of county activities. In your experience, not just in Albany County, but in the state of New York in general, do you find that typically a county will eventually circle back and seek to regain some of its expenses through the Medicaid system, through someone's estate?
They do indeed.
Okay.
And it varies county by county how aggressive they pursue estates and how aggressively they pursue spouses' estates. But certainly there is an increase in momentum for that activity. The state is looking at this, counties are looking at this, and they're looking at ways that they can become more efficient and to have the manpower, because not all counties are staffed properly to pursue those kinds of claims, but they're looking at ways that they can increase their activity and looking at budgets projected forward, Medicaid, Medicare budgets, Social Security, and federal tax revenues. It can be anticipated with some certainty that that type of activity is going to increase in the coming years, simply because the budget deficits will continue to grow as our population ages.
Tell me about health care. What types of advice do you find that you can give to clients about opportunities other than Medicare and Medicaid that may be available to them in order to provide them health care?
We look at insurance products, we look at tax planning, and there are smart ways to pay for health care, and part of that becomes a tax planner's job, and that's part of our job as estate planning elder law attorneys, because when you pay for health care expenses, the tax code gives you a deduction. It allows you to deduct all of your health care expenses over 7.5% of your gross income. And when you get into nursing home expenses and things like that, it's far in excess of 7.5% of your gross income. So we can use assets like an IRA or a 401k, retirement plan assets, where you would normally have to pay all the income tax when you pull the money out. And you can pull money out to pay for these types of expenses, but offset it with a deduction for the medical expense. So when we lay out a plan for a client, we look at what resources they have available to them. Financial resources like an IRA, stocks and bonds, their other assets. What types of family resources do they have who might be able to provide them with some care? And then integrate the tax planning. And again, the long-term care insurance products that are available today are much better than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago when they came out. And now they have products that pay indemnity benefits, which, Peter, are far superior to the reimbursement contracts. Just to give you an example, if you're living at home and you have a child, and that child says, "Dad, I'm willing to come home and take care of you, but I can't afford to leave my job because I have 3 children of my own, and they have expenses, and we have expenses." If you have an indemnity policy and you need that type of care, then that indemnity policy will put a check in your mailbox the first of every month and allow you to spend the money. So you could actually hire your daughter and pay your daughter or another family member with those insurance proceeds. A reimbursement contract, which many of these policies are, would tell you that you have to go out and hire a certified home health agency and pay that agency, and only then submit the claims to us, and we will reimburse you for the money that you have laid out for these qualified providers. Not a family member, not a neighbor, not a church member, but only a qualified agency. So when people are looking at long-term care insurance products, they really need to talk to a qualified agent, someone who knows all the products in the market and can guide them through. It's a very complex purchase, but indemnity versus reimbursement, to me, is a major difference. In our practice, we're a little different. We actually have a social worker on our staff that we call a geriatric care manager. And that's something that's growing across the country. There's a National Association of Geriatric Care Managers. And that's someone who actually goes into the home and helps to coordinate care for our clients. And as always, if you have cash, care will be available. There are ways to use the system when you have money to spend. So an indemnity contract for long-term care is one way that we counsel our clients to get that cash flow in place when the need arises, the money's there to pay for the care that they need, wherever they want to receive it.
You know, there's an element about that plan that I think may be very attractive to many of our seniors, and that's the idea of being able to choose a family member, a trusted family member, to be able to provide the care that's needed in your own home. It really hits two issues that are very near and dear to people. One, being able to enjoy their residence that they've enjoyed for many years, and also not having someone come into the home that may be a stranger and that may take untoward acts toward them or their property. The news is full of reports in this way, and people are a little nervous to take in people that they don't necessarily know. Certainly, they'd rather have a family member, and it sounds like this type of policy may allow someone more choice. And isn't choice so very important?
Access and choice, as I said earlier, are the two keys to planning. If you fail to plan, then you don't have those options available to you. And then we talk to our clients about what's left. Once they've lost the opportunity to buy the insurance products, to do the financial planning and the tax planning, which unfortunately, Peter, is most people. So people don't do this type of planning. It's so hard mentally, emotionally, psychologically, to cross all the barriers to say, okay, I'm now going to consider that I may be ill and so frail that I need this kind of help. It's hard for us to think about that. So most people don't do the planning. And most people end up, when the event occurs, when the house is on fire, then looking to try to do some planning. And there are some things that can be done even at that late stage.
And oftentimes it can be a difficult subject for the children to broach with their senior parents as well, because you're not really sure what their reaction might be, and they might think that the conversation is awkward themselves and no one wants to go there, and it often leaves it till until the very end, when you have fewer choices available.
There was a study done that indicated children are more likely to talk to their parents about sex than about estate planning.
Right.
And there's just a silence and a kind of a code of silence almost in families that you don't broach that subject. You don't cross that threshold. But in order to do this successfully, families do have to work together, and they should communicate, and they should be able to talk about, if things did happen, how would we prepare for that? Who would be the caregiver? Where would care be provided? How would it be paid for? Those are the key questions. And once that barrier comes down and the dialogue begins, the planning can start. And then you can look at all the resources and bringing all those resources to bear for the client and put that plan together in a way that when the time comes, when the event occurs, it's not a shock, it's not a surprise, it's planned for. And then when these plans do work and when the policies are in place or the trusts are in place, and the families can just go about the business of being families and caring for that aging family member at the point in time when they need true care and love and all the things that a family brings, rather than worrying about finances and worrying about where are the assets at that late date. The families have such a much higher chance of success, keeping their family members at home, doing the right things, feeling good about it, and having been one of those caregivers for my family and my mother and father, there's a huge amount of guilt and emotional turmoil that the children go through in looking at their parents who were their pillars for so many years. And now really you begin to parent your parents, and you have to become the person shepherding their care and their finances and their lives. And that's hard unless the plan is laid out and clear.
And it seems to me, Counselor, that oftentimes very simple steps can be taken to alleviate what could otherwise be a significant problem. For instance, possibly creating powers of attorney, or creating a healthcare proxy, or even the Revocable Trust. Could you tell us a little bit about those documents?
Sure, absolutely. Once you move away from the financial issue of how do you pay for care, the estate planning issues.
Right.
And as planners, what we try to do is to keep our clients out of court. No offense. Courts are wonderful places. But if you can stay out of them, it's not a bad idea. And we do that using these documents advance directives we call one set, which is during your lifetime. If you lose your ability to decide health care, what doctor, what treatment, what procedure, do you want treatment at the end of life? Do you want artificial treatment withheld at the end of life? All of those decisions can be made in advance. It's a healthcare proxy that we call it. It's a document. State provides forms. We have our own form in our office, modeled off the state form, with a set of choices that people can make, different types of choices. And there's a living will that can be incorporated with that. We do that all in one document, the healthcare proxy. And that's a phenomenal tool to have when you go to the hospital and the hospital has to communicate who do they talk to and what are your wishes and how do they know what your wishes are. All done in advance. Power of attorney, you mentioned, that's a great document to have. All of our clients come out of our office with a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney. That's the financial document. If you need decisions made, bills paid, assets managed, you have a power of attorney, you've appointed your agents. You can appoint one or multiple agents. You can appoint all of your children and ruin their lives forever, making them agree on all the decisions that have to be made on your behalf. But it's thought about, it's done in advance, and those are put in place. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy, pillars of our estate planning. And you mentioned also a revocable trust, which we see more and more. And people come to our office and ask for living trusts or revocable trusts. There's a lot written about them. There are books written about them. And it gives phenomenal advantages because you are setting up, in effect, your own company, your trust. You can be your own trustee. It's a revocable trust. This is not the trust that protects assets for Medicaid purposes. But it does give you the ability to have your assets in trust managed by yourself. Then you can have successor trustees if you become incapacitated. And upon your death, your trust can simply distribute to your heirs. And it avoids another court, the surrogates court, which is the probate process. So as more people become aware of these, we get more requests. And we do a lot of revocable trusts, especially for seniors, to bridge that time from the present through incapacity, through death, and on to the heirs for the ultimate distribution of assets. It's a document that spans that whole time continuum.
You know, I recall when we were in law school, there's discussion about irrevocable and revocable, and there were certain tax benefits. If it's irrevocable, certain things would be to someone's benefit. Mm-hmm. Does that have any play in this discussion now?
Yes, absolutely. And Professor Bloom might have been the professor that
he was
that you listened to, and so did I at Albany Law School, who was a mentor to many of us in the bar that do this type of work.
That's right.
And the revocable trust is a tool designed for flexibility, for ease of use, to be your own trustee, to manage assets during periods of incapacity, and to avoid probate, and to distribute assets upon death. Does not have true tax benefits, does not have asset protection benefits. If you want to get tax benefits or asset protection, then your trust must be irrevocable. And typically we have someone else on as the trustee of an irrevocable trust, and it's not yourself. So it could be a child, a family member, an advisor that acts as the trustee. And those trusts can be very beneficial for tax purposes. And also, as we mentioned, the primary way to plan, if you cannot do the planning with insurance, the primary way to plan to access the only program available for long-term care, and that's Medicaid, is the irrevocable trust.
Well, it sounds like a dynamic tool, and you're saying that more and more people are pursuing that type of structure in order to maintain their property.
And trusts are gaining more widespread acceptance at financial institutions, but also they're talked about in communities. If you were in Florida, you could have a free dinner every night going to a trust seminar. They're so prevalent down there. Not quite as bad up here, but we do have seminars that we give and other attorneys give on educating people on how to use trusts and what should be in them.
Well, I think one of the main messages that we're hearing from you today overall is that if you don't make plans for yourself or for loved ones, someone else, possibly even a court or someone you don't even know, will be deciding and making choices for you on your health care and on the disposition of your property. Is that a fair assessment?
That's an absolutely accurate assessment. And in planning, it's setting yourself up to have protection, to have the people that you want making decisions for you, giving them guidance on those decisions, and having it spelled out before events occur. That's planning. And there's an old adage, failing to plan is planning to fail. And very often when you throw your lot to the courts, whether it be in guardianship or in probate, things happen. People can come in and influence decisions, and there can be controversies and contests. And the only people, Peter, that win in those circumstances are the lawyers, because all the lawyers in the courtroom are getting paid to be there when none of them would have to be there had the plan been laid out properly.
Counselor, how can people get a hold of you if they have further questions about today's subject?
My office is right here in Corporate Woods in the town of Colonie, and our phone number is 459-2100, 459-2100. There is also a great deal of information on our website, and the website is www.pierrolaw, that's PIERROLAW.com.
Well, I can tell you, Lou, we've been very fortunate today to have you share some information about a very important subject for all of the residents of the town of Colonie, and I appreciate you joining me today.
Well, Peter, it has been my true pleasure.
I'm Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.